Hi, my name is Adelaide Asterix and this is my pronouns masterclass. You're watching Eagle TV. The purpose of this video is to clear up some of the misconceptions or confusion that people might have around the use of pronouns. This is coming from my personal experience as a trans woman, and I've also been non-binary at different times of my life. So technically I've used pretty much every major pronoun, but also it's coming from my experience within trans and queer communities. So pronouns are words like he, she, it, and they, which substitute the full name of a thing in a sentence. So they exist in lots of languages, but obviously this is going to be an English guide so that you feel confident using different pronouns in different situations. This has been a hot topic of conversation in recent years with the emergence of trans people into the public eye. He, him, his is the masculine form, linguistically speaking, and she, her, hers is the feminine form. There are gender neutral pronouns, which are things like it and they. I say masculine and feminine form because these are linguistic terms used across a range of languages to describe different forms of word. It doesn't mean that the person using a masculine pronoun, for example, is going to be masculine themselves. So think about, for example, like a butch, for example, who might use she, her, her pronouns. There isn't a direct correlation between like the gender of the language and like the gender of the person. But what is important to recognize is these words do have genders that carry over into language and about the sorts of assumptions that people are going to make. And so this is where we get into reasons why trans and queer people change pronouns or have to be assertive about the sorts of pronouns that they want to be referred to them. So they is a pronoun in English that most commonly refers to groups of people or things. So they are over there, for example. And it can also refer to one person. So this is used by trans people often who don't want to have a gender applied to them through the use of language. So if you're using he or she pronouns for someone, as I said, it does inadvertently gender the person. Some people are fine perhaps with dissonance surrounding this, but they is always there as an option, which just sort of like abstains from the question of whether that person is masculine or feminine. I actually used to use they for several years when I was identifying as non-binary, and it was just like a good space for me in order to just like spend some time in between. I use she, her, hers now. It's important to recognize that they exist as a space for people who don't identify with either of the mainstream gender roles or designations, but also there are people who will happily want to exist in that for life. So it doesn't have to be like on your way somewhere. They can be is a valid pronoun in and of itself. First of all, they is not a new construction within English. It may seem new because of new public conversations surrounding transness and pronouns, but actually they is an old pronoun within English and it has been used in the singular since the 14th century. It's not wrong like on the level of history. It's also not wrong due to the fact that English is a dynamic language. It is evolving. And so there are certain words that sort of have to come into existence if we're going to change the world to make it more habitable. So I always use they in writing if I'm referring to like a hypothetical person. I feel like this used to be quite a common way that people would construct sentences in older writing, but I feel like language like went through like a patriarchal moment where it was always like he and mankind, and like the hypothetical subject was like always a man. And then after like 1970s feminism, it was then like he or she, which is great but also so clunky. I always just say like, use they. It's so easy, it's correct, and it's a pretty safe bet. My example sentence is, they hung a painting up in their bedroom for themselves and no one else. So in this sentence, you can hear the double use of the word they and the two sort of constructions that you can use, especially when using it singularly. Some people get really confused, perhaps who aren't used to using they for one person, when another person starts talking about someone using their they pronoun and then they assume it's a group, and it can get kind of confusing when you're bringing those assumptions to the table. But to be honest, context will tell you everything. So it will become quite clear if the people being referred to in the sentence are a group or it's just one person, just from listening to like the other things that someone is saying. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that there isn't some slippage, but paying more attention and getting used to that is sort of what you have to do. So sometimes people say themselves when talking about a single person. In my opinion, this is like incorrect because it's like selves in the plural, and it sort of comes from the more common use of they as like a collective noun. Themself is a construction that is sort of having resurgence in recent years, and I think that it should just come into form. But don't be alarmed if you see a red line underneath it in spell check. Themself, I think, is the correct form. And my last tip for using they in everyday language is it's a pretty safe bet if you don't know the gender of the person that you're speaking about. So while on the one hand it's wrong to use they for absolutely everybody because people are also entitled to their genders, we love our she's and we love our he's, it's also like fine to just be like they if you don't yet know someone's pronoun. There's no one way to find out someone's pronouns. So some corporate or activist models will advocate for something called a pronoun round, where like a group of people will go around and say their name and the pronouns that they use. But this also has its problems because it forces people to out themselves in quite a public way. So I've been in pronoun rounds before where I'm like the only trans person in the room, and it's like all these cis people being like John, he, him, and like just saying the pronouns that they obviously have, and then and then feeling like a weird pressure on me to like confess where I'm coming from. So the second option you have is to directly ask people. So an example of that question would be like, hey, what's your pronoun? It's pretty simple, it's quite respectful, and it's direct. But again, this isn't like the best practice for everybody because people don't owe you their pronouns. And like many trans people can attest to being in situations where people are like aggressively asking them their pronouns. They don't necessarily want to share it with that person. As a trans woman, when people ask me my pronouns, I'm sort of like, well, what do you think I use? And I think lots of trans women in particular feel similar to this, where it's like, well, why have we gone into all this effort to be seen in a certain way that then someone is like, well, could it be he or something? So the best way to find out someone's pronouns, in my opinion, is to listen to someone who's close to that person and see what they use. You can also read someone's bio or something like this. Obviously, I would use a grain of salt in regards to this. For example, if it's like someone's toxic colleague or like their parent or something like this, if you go off what someone like that is saying, obviously you're going to be like misgendering that person and helping to perpetuate that. So I guess there's problems with all of the different models, which is why we're going to go through some just like sensitivity and literacy stuff in the next sections. So a big part of sensitivity is being able and confident to correct people around you. So in queer and trans communities, this works quite well, where, for example, someone might change their pronoun. They might have been using something before, but something might change, as these things do, and they'll just tell a couple of people close to them, and then those people will then perpetuate that. And for example, if it comes up in conversation with someone else, they'll be like, oh, Kai uses he now. So that's like just like a really casual way that you can help correct someone if they're using the wrong pronouns and if you know those pronouns for sure. The big caveat with this is that not all people use the same pronouns in every space that they're in. So someone might be like they at home and she, her at work. And so you shouldn't assume that someone's out in every space. And this is where it gets into like sensitivity and transliteracy stuff. So be sensitive. Find out the person who you're talking about's pronouns, like find a way to find them out. And then once you know them, use them confidently. If you're having trouble using the right pronoun for someone, my tip is to practice and do it away from that person. Like do it in your head or do it like in the broom closet, wherever you've got to go, and just say their name and then say that pronoun 3 times. That sounds really simple, but it will go a long way towards you not making mistakes to that person's face and potentially making them feel crap. If you make a mistake with someone's pronoun, just say sorry in a genuine and short way and then just move on. Then you can show later on that you know the right pronoun by using it confidently. So as with a lot of trans stuff, people will tell you again and again not to make assumptions. And this is really important because most cis people are quite in the dark about the reality of trans lives, about language, things like this. But this video has the intention of making you less in the dark. So while it's important not to make assumptions if you're coming from a place of ignorance, it's also okay to listen and be receptive to the information that trans people are putting out there about ourselves. So the more trans people that you meet, the more trans people that you form relationships with and that you see in the media, the better you're going to get at being able to recognize the information that we're putting out there, whether it's verbally, through our presentation. And so you're going to get better at recognizing what each situation calls for and being able to talk about us accurately and respectfully. Thank you so much for watching my pronouns masterclass. My name is Adelaide Asterix and I'm with Eagle TV. You can find out more about me and about Eagle Leather with the links below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.